Warm greetings on behalf of the Wednesdays.for.Water, an initiative of the W4W Foundation, a think tank instituted as Citizens Collective. We welcome you to the 97th session of Wednesdays for Water, and which is based on water and biodiversity series. It is the session 3 of the series, and it's titled Mammals in Aquatic Habitats, Fishing Cats and Humpback Dolphins, the Ecological Significance and Their Conservation. As you are aware that Wednesdays for Water was instituted long back, now it's 2 years, we are there with the objective to engage in conversation with water experts, grassroots practitioners, policymakers, and youth to explore the complex intertwined issues associated with water and explore possible solutions. We have expanded since then to have more activities like Friday Waters, Monday Munching with Women for Water, besides organizing water workshops, water walk and talks, seminars, special courses, and conference panels to continue the water conversation in various possible ways we can. I hope you are looking at our website, www.w4w.in, for more details. Today, for the Water and Biodiversity series, we have with us Dr. Jayati Chourey, Dr. Giridhar Malla, Dr. Rahul Muralidharan, and a young discussant, Akhil Pradeep Kumar Menon, to take the conversation further. So before I hand it over to Jayati, let me just quickly introduce Jayati for all of us. Dr. Jayati Chourey is the Executive Director at the South Asia Consortium for Interdisciplinary Water Resources Studies, which is SaciWATERs. She holds a degree in ecosystem-based integrated water resource management, and I'm going to take this conversation further through the chat box and hand it over to Jayati for further session coordination. So over to you, Jayati, and thank you all the participants for making these conversations so useful. And as you notice, we are inching towards 100 sessions, so we are also excited. And we are equally excited for today's sessions to learn about other creatures than human beings. So over to you, Jayati.
So Maggie, thank you so much for the introduction, and also for providing me with this opportunity to design and host this webinar series on water and biodiversity. Am I audible? So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the episode 3 of Water and Biodiversity webinar series that is organized on every second Wednesday of the month. This series was launched in February to create and develop public awareness on aquatic biodiversity and their conservation status. This special series take away the spotlight from Homo sapiens sapiens, the modern humans, and shift it on other species with whom we share this planet. So these sessions are designed to bring the ecological perspective to the forefront, which is generally absent from mainstream anthropocentric water discourses. So in every session, we take you to a new aquatic ecosystem and some amazing species. Our first episode was on freshwater indigenous fish from India, and we had focus on snow trout from Jammu and Kashmir and state fish of Telangana. And in our second episode, our speakers talked about marine invertebrates, especially about sharks, rays, and sea turtles. So today's episode will focus on mammals in aquatic ecosystems. So first of all, may I briefly introduce to you our first guest speaker, Dr. Giridhar. Dr. Giridhar is an independent researcher working on conserving small wild cats. He has done his PhD on fishing cats of Godavari Delta from Wildlife Institute of India. And he's also founder of Godavari Fishing Cat Project. And he's very passionate about illustrating children's wildlife comic books for educational activities. A very warm welcome to Dr. Giridhar. So he will be talking about long-term conservation of fishing cats in coastal habitats of Andhra Pradesh. I would like to mention here that fishing cat is one of the most neglected wildlife species in the country, despite the fact that they are considered as flagship species for wetland conservation. Due to their strong association with the wetland, including tidal mangrove forest. So over to you, Dr. Giridhar. I'm like confident that this session is going to be very interesting and enriching.
Thank you, Jayati. Thank you very much. And good evening, everyone. My name is Giridhar, and as Jayati has mentioned, so I've been working on fishing cats for quite some time, like 8 years, in the Godavari Delta of Andhra Pradesh. And I'll be sharing my presentation now. I hope everyone can see this.
Yes, it's visible. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, so I'll be talking about the fishing cat. So why it's very secretive cats? Because fishing cats are not known to many people. Even when we first started the work, so when I interacted with the fishing communities and all, they said that like the cat is very secretive. That's how the entire essence of my PhD started. Like, let us like study this animal because it's a very challenging species to study on. And then
Maybe you like to put it on the slideshow mode, Girdhar?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So the fishing cat is not everywhere on the earth. It's only on, it's discontinued distributed throughout the South and Southeast Asia. And you can see this very small patches throughout, which is marked here. This is the only places where we can find the fishing cat, despite fishing cat being a very, charismatic species and a wetland species. And what Jayati was telling about, it's a flagship species for many wetlands in India and other Southeast Asian countries, but the distribution is very sparse. You can see them in very tiny pockets of every range country which is present. So we have, so I'm the partner member of the Fishing Cat Conservation Alliance, where we have like team members where we work on different range countries for protecting the fishing cat in their own countries. So it's not like some foreigner coming and protecting, but we as like the own people of that country, just we protect the fishing cat by this alliance. So you can find out more with the website provided below. So my work is basically on the Godavari River. You can see there that the Godavari River bifurcates the south and north and south India. And that's the place where it joins into the Bay of Bengal, is where my study focuses on, the Godavari Delta. So Godavari River, after coming from the Western Ghats, it enters into Andhra Pradesh at Papikonda National Park, which is also one of the picturesque landscape in Andhra Pradesh. And then it enters into Polavaram and it becomes into a huge flood bank. And then it divides into two major distributaries like Gautami and Godavari. My major focus was, and for my PhD and for my conservation activities, I focus mostly on the northern part of the Godavari, that is the Gautami Godavari. So this is the landscape of the Gautami Godavari. You can see there are a lot of mangrove species. This is how the landscape looks like. And see, this is the creeks, subtidal creeks inside the mangrove forest. And then first, when I started this program, I didn't know like how secret is that. And I went on inquiring the people, like I talked with them and I went on a board and I was looking at this signs, like where should I study and where should I look for them. Then there were the signs. They were like actually every cat, including tigers, leave the scent marks. So they have the scent marks on everywhere, like this scats. We call them as scats. This is like they're everywhere in the sanctuary and the protected area, as well as in the Godavari mangroves. Even you can see them. They didn't leave a small temple which was meant by these fishing communities, where the fishing communities worship there. So, and this is my first fishing cat observation. So I saw it, and it's like one of the luckiest picture for me, because seeing a fishing cat itself is very difficult. But first time I saw that, it's like swimming across the creeks. So, and also this is the first image when anyone have ever seen in the wild that fishing cats are like swimming. So it should be a very lucky image for me in the first go itself. And then like how I started the study, like tigers, even individual fishing cats can be studied based on their different coat patterns. So here you can see there's a different individual fishing cats, how we identify the cats. And then studying in the mangroves is not an easy task. So you have to take all the camera traps in the boat and drive long distances. And also, you know that the mangroves are like have this spring tides and neap tides during this full moon and new moon. So you have to be extremely cautious to keep the camera traps at the right position. Otherwise, they will be submerged with the incoming tide. So we have to travel long distance and keep them. And this is where then we have to look at the signs, the tracks of the fishing cat, and then we place the camera traps, and then we got our beautiful images of fishing cats in the wild. So you can see, and this is one individual which I studied for my PhD. I have individual 25 cats I was studying for my PhD, and this is one of the cat, which is a male. I kept the name as Cube. So it's the largest male in the territory where I was studying on. And then the other cats which kept on coming and simultaneously. So, and also cats have this typical tendency to urinate on every foreign particle which is there. So you can see that it's like spraying on my camera traps back there when I was doing my camera trap. It's like every cat used to do. It's like a territorial marking for them, because whenever a foreign or alien object comes into the territory, they just try to do it. It's like a cat behavior. And even in the home cats, you can see that they do that. So, and they just keep on doing this behavior for rubbing against the camera traps. And many times they just distorted my camera trap from the proper view. So again, I have to go there and again I have to do it. And so also along with the fishing cats, we also have the smooth coated otters. Their population is also very good. This is also one indicator of the wetlands in this area. So actually their population is also dwelling comparatively. So after this, so we thought that, like, what do they eat? Fishing cats, typically the name itself tells them that they eat a lot of fishes, and their range goes with level, like 20 species of fishes which are present in the mangroves. And this is how where the conflict happens to the communities, where the community is also very dependent on the fishes. So sometimes, but not very huge conflict happens, but it's a kind of it's fight with their food resources. How do they during the fishing times? And coming to my study area, why the focus more and why I started the project and why I started this conservation activity, because Godavari River is the in India, it's one of the river which has the major dams. The highest number of dams of any other river in India, it's in the Godavari River. We have around 921 dams, which literally create a lot of threats to the downstream. When you only compare with the benefits of the dam, but there are a lot of downstream impacts which happen. You can see this here a time series images from 1984 to 2019. You can see like how this erosion is happening and how much aquaculture industry is increasing. So this is all like impacting the mangroves, and also as well as decreasing the habitat of the fishing cats. And so you can see these images where in the how the coastal erosion is happening and how these mangroves are dying here, and the sand ingression is happening into the mangroves. So ultimately, when the sand ingression happens into the mangroves, so the porous material decreases and the mangroves eventually die. And then this is that like huge expansion of aquaculture industry, and also the blockage of the smaller creeks into the major creeks. So this also halts, like which also acts as a barrier for a lot of movement of fishes inside the mangroves to the sea, which also decreases the food resources for the fishing cat. So these are all the like immediate threats to the fishing cat population. And also, though this is not major, but still people go into the forest and cut the mangroves for their livelihood activities. So then I started this Children for Fishing Cat activity. It's the fun part to make children as the ambassadors for the fishing cat. So wherein we used to go to the schools and teach the kids about what is fishing cat and what you have to do protecting them. And we used to show them the camera trap images. And sometimes we also used to ask them, you can name the fishing cat, so that we used to keep that particular name to the cat which we found out. So that's how we started in like engaging the kids to understand the ecology as well as the conservation perspective of the fishing cat. So we did painting competitions, and during the COVID time, we understand that the kids have suffered a lot. So we developed a game called as Cat in the Creek. So where it's like about discussing about the ecology of the fishing cat in a very innovative way to understand. It's for the understandable of the kids, like how how the cat moves into the what fish it understands, and that game we designed, and it got a huge response, and a lot of school teachers made the kids to play during that COVID time. And also we did a safety measures, and we kept fishing cat as one of the safety measures for informing the kids about the safetiness of the COVID protocol that time. So this also was displayed in the schools and all. So that way also fishing cat became like a mascot, and it became like a very integral part of their communities support. And then we also have these I made this comic books also, which helps in raising funds with the book which sold, which I'll be printing the book to the communities. And so that's how we started. And then this is another book which I designed. And we also do frequent training to the local youth and school kids towards coming and helping out the conservation of fishing cats. So that's all from my side. And yeah, thank you for giving me this opportunity to showcase my work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Giridhar. Amazing job you are doing. And I personally enjoyed this session because I'm a cat lover.
Yeah.
So thanks for this interesting presentation. And I'll not take much time now. We'll have another this open discussion and Q&A session to have more interaction with you about these fishing cats. So now I would like to invite our next panelist, Dr. Rahul Muralidharan. So he will be talking about humpback dolphins along the east coast of India. Dr. Muralidharan has done his PhD in Conservation Science and Sustainability Studies from ATRI, Bangalore. And he has extensively worked on dolphins in Indo-Pacific region. So let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Rahul Muralidharan. Over to you, Dr. Rahul.
Thank you, Jayati. Thank you very much for providing me this opportunity to speak here. And what a fascinating presentation by Giridhar, which actually sets the context for my talk. Because, in a way, the habitats of fishing cats and humpback dolphins are quite interconnected, because these are coastal dolphins. So in the brief that Jayati gave in the beginning, she mentioned that we are moving from studying human impacts to studying animals, understanding animals. But it's very difficult to remove this human link from, any conservation activities or any wildlife. And humpback dolphins, being an elusive species, being a commonly occurring species in India, are also affected by human activities. And at the end of the day, conservation is management of human impacts and activities. So, why the name humpback dolphins? You can actually see from this image that there's a small hump here. I'm just trying to, yeah. So this is the small hump that's mostly found on these dolphins, and we have different populations in India, which I'll be covering during my talk. So basically, I got introduced to humpback dolphins during my conservation work when I was studying in college. I used to be part of the student sea turtle conservation network, where we did sea turtle walks in the night, and usually in the morning I used to hang out with the fishers on the beach and go out into the sea. And that's when I actually learned that there are dolphins. This was about 15 years ago. And some questions were actually lingering in my head, because interacting closely with the fishers, spending a lot of time with them, I sort of understood their worldviews and their understanding about wildlife and how they sort of take measures to protect them and so on. But what I was reading in the classroom and what I was experiencing on the field were completely different. On one hand, the popular literature or the scientific literature on conservation talks about fishing being a threat to the dolphins. But on the other hand, like we have like communities that have shared the spaces with dolphins for a long time, that they have certain practices in terms of fishing and in terms of what happens when dolphins get caught and so on. And therefore, like they sort of engage in more sustainable forms of fishing, and their livelihoods are also under. So, humpback dolphins are very different across the world. So at least you can see four species here. And the Sousa theudzi is mostly found in the west coast of Africa. And the Sousa plumbea, which we also find in the west coast of India, extends up to the east coast of Africa. And you can actually see how these animals are, like the hump is very clearly visible compared to the species that we are looking at on the east coast of India. On the east coast, it's a very interesting sort of puzzle because scientists don't know what species we have, because we also have like a particular population that's inhabiting around Sri Lankan waters. So there is like a lot of cross-country migration happening between dolphins. So there's a general confusion. That's why we have both Chinensis and plumbea. And after that, like, in parts of in Indonesia, Taiwan, and then Australia, we have other species. So humpback dolphins are common along the Indian waters. So they basically prefer water within 20 meters depth. So which they are like very close, and they are mainly found in areas around estuaries. We have like several estuaries along the east coast of India. In fact, like a lot of dolphins on the Andhra Pradesh side too, in Krishna Godavari estuaries. Mangroves, mudflats, lagoons, seagrass, and coral reefs. So this map that you see actually shows the distribution. It's very patchy on the east coast, but very continuous on the west coast. Certain geographical features also define their presence. I'll show another map that actually exhibits this. Humpback dolphins, because of their presence in nearshore waters or coastal areas, they are vulnerable to several anthropogenic pressures, mainly fishing and industrial activities that happens along the coast. Though they are like a common species, like frequently cited in some areas, there is paucity of information on humpback dolphins. Like there's long-term studies we don't have, and systematic studies that actually look at populations, presence. Though there are studies that are coming up, like we don't have adequate studies to actually understand how the animals are doing in Indian waters. So there is like I'll be focusing on one thread, which is fishing. And because humpback dolphins depend on various types of nearshore fish and estuarine fish that are also targeted by small-scale artisanal fishing, there is an overlap in the same target species. Therefore, like humpback dolphins also get incidentally caught in fishing gear because there's no like targeted hunting, but basically a bycatch and incidental capture of a non-target species. So this photo actually here shows the Sousa plumbea, the population that we find on the west coast. You can see the hump, how big the animal is and how robust the animal is. So, I mean, if these animals get caught in small fishing nets, they can actually easily break open. You can see how muscular they are. Only when they get caught in large nets, like shoreside nets and gill nets, it's very difficult for them to break. So, on one hand, we have like, humpback dolphins, fishing, feeding in the wild and so on. But on the other parts of Tamil Nadu coast, there's like a market conflict between humpback dolphins and fishing, because in this region, dolphins attack fishing gears, like not just damaging them, but also taking fish from the nets because they're behaviorally adapted to doing that. And therefore, it causes a lot of economic loss for small-scale fishing communities. So on a day-to-day basis, people might earn like about 400, 500 rupees on a good day. On a bad day, nothing at all. But if dolphins come and take fish from the nets, like not just they don't only lose the fish, but also the fishing nets and their next day fishing. So there's like some animosity in the southern parts of Tamil Nadu, which I'll explain in like further. So because dolphins and fishers have like shared the same space, like there are also like local names for humpback dolphins. Are white and pinkish in color with spotting on them. In Tamil Nadu, they are called Paru Veden and Sori Veden. Veden is for dolphin. So when they're saying Paru Veden or Sori Veden, Sori is indicating the marks on the dolphins, and Paru Veden means like it feeds on small fish. And in the southern part of Tamil Nadu, they call it as Vella Ongi, white dolphin. So, so this map actually shows the bathymetric features on the east and west coast of India, which I mentioned that it also influences the presence of dolphins. So if you look at the west coast, you see that the nearshore waters are shallow, and unlike east coast, there's a proper spread area where there are shallow waters. So this provides habitats for humpback dolphins, continuous presence of humpback dolphins. But in the east coast of India, we have like deeper as well as shallow waters and like large estuaries where they're centered around. Like in the east coast, they're mostly found in Odisha, areas around Kakinada, Krishna Godavari estuary, most parts of Tamil Nadu. But as you see south of Tamil Nadu, like around Gulf of Mannar and Parkway, again, like we have shallow waters. And these areas are also quite rich in biodiversity because the Parkway mostly has seagrass beds and Gulf of Mannar has coral reef islands. So the diversity of fish is very high. And also in parts of Coromandel Coast, like extending from Andhra Pradesh to the northern part of Tamil Nadu, the sea is very rough and the water is very turbid. But in the Parkway and Gulf of Mannar, it's the opposite. The underwater visibility is much better. So dolphins are able to also visibly hunt. So in the Coromandel Coast, like dolphins are worshipped. People refer to humpback dolphins as Kuttiyandi. So the story goes that there was a king during the Chola times who wanted to protect dolphins, and he made a ring out of clay and threw it into the water, asking the dolphins to search for them. So it is believed that till day the dolphins are, searching for that ring, and it also actually coincides with some of the feeding behaviors of humpback dolphins. When they hunt for crabs and other species, bottom species, they make like these circular sort of marks on the seabed. And in the Coromandel Coast, there is belief that if dolphins get caught in fishing nets, it brings bad luck to fishing, and therefore people have to go back to the shore, do some rituals, and then go back to fishing. So there is some sort of reverence with respect to how people see dolphins in the Coromandel Coast of India. But as I mentioned, in the Parkway and Gulf of Mannar region, there is a clear conflict between dolphins and the fishing community. So the image on the left actually shows an illustration of a gill net. So this is how a gill net is set underwater. So there are floats on top and there are sinkers on the bottom. So basically the net stands like a screen. And when fish swim in, they get caught in their gills. So if you are underwater, you can actually see the head of the fish caught on one side and the body of the fish caught on the other side. So basically the humpback dolphins, what they do as a group, they do is they go to the side where the body is visible, and they actually swim along the net. So they just take the body alone and they leave the head of the fish, which is visible in this picture. So when a huge pod of dolphin comes, like about 20-25 dolphins, they take all the fish from the nets. And not only they take the fish from the nets, they also damage the net so that net cannot be used the next day. So this is an image of this 3 fish was only caught in one particular fishing trip. the fisher lost like most of the fish because dolphins ate them. And on the left, you can see people tie knots around where dolphins bite. So this is for them to identify and work on it later. So that's all from my end on this presentation. I also wanted to remark that though there's like paucity of information on humpback dolphins, there are many methods and ways to carry out research, low-cost methods, which we can discuss further during the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul, for this very informative presentation. It was quite interesting to know about like how dolphins are worshipped by local communities, and this all these folklores and stories from the history. So thank you so much, and I totally agree with you that we cannot dissociate humans from nature because they are part of it, integral part of it. But what I meant to say is that like most of the time when we talk about water, it's like from human point of view, from we talk about human usage. When we say water, so we think about irrigation, we think about power, we think power generation, we think about drinking water, sanitation, and sometimes we do talk about ecosystem services and fisheries, but then that is also from human point of view. And when we talk about ecosystem services, we look at the kind of services are provided by the ecosystems to human beings. And when we talk about fishing, we talk up fisheries, we talk about it from livelihood and food security point of view. So here I wanted to say that like here in this series, we want to consider human as just one another, like one of the species on this planet, and then talk about other species as like one of the living creature. So that was the idea behind it. And definitely this traditional knowledge and then local communities are integral part of the nature. And we see that our ancestors were like they adopted very the kind of lifestyle they had was very sustainable. So we have a lot to learn from these local communities and their traditional knowledge. So once again, thank you so much. So I would now request our youth representative, Akhil Menon, and he is pursuing his master's in public policy from OP Jindal Global University, and he is interested in bird watching and photography. He has also worked towards biodiversity conservation in Thane, Mumbai. So so welcome, Akhil. I would request you to lead this open discussion and Q&A session.
Yes, good afternoon, good evening to everybody present here. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'll start with the few questions that I have, and if we have more questions, we can take that up on the chat, or if somebody wants, they can unmute and speak what the question is. So my first question is to Giridhar sir. So as you said, the cats are really sly and it's very difficult to spot them. So do you think that is like, I am a public policy student, so I will look everything through a public policy perspective. So today, currently, the public policy is very data driven. So do you think that is one reason why these cats are ignored in the whole context of wildlife protection? Because they're really elusive, it's difficult for us to spot, the data is very sketchy, something like that. So is that one of the reasons, or there are various other reasons as you see?
No, yeah, it's the cat is not being studied is for some other reasons, because since like all the cats are secretive, even if you talk about tiger or cheetah, except the cheetah and lion, most of the cats are secretive. They don't show up that easily. So that's why we go with like non-invasive techniques like camera trapping and all. Because like in India, when you compare with the charismatic species, because much of the attention goes with the charismatic and the funding also, because much of the funding in India has been drawn by tiger conservation. And so, because if you protect the tiger, many people argue that you protect everything in that ecosystem. But sometimes it might not be true, because there are ecosystems where there are not tigers, like the one where I'm studying. There are fishing cats. It's a very important flagship species. But the ultimate thing about studying that animal or anything depends on the funding. The funding is crucial, and the amount of in the ecological data we need, that is all important. So I think that these many years of natural history studies of in India, still we have the small cats are not that studied. If you in India we have around like 10 species of small cats, but hardly many species are not. I mean, they're known, but hardly any studies have been done on it. But only the occurrence data, like the cat is present here, the cat is found here. Except that we don't have any detailed studies. So the thing is mostly because of these cats are neglected, and much of the funding also gets very less. If you look at the global scenario, when you I mean, I'm talking about the global scenario on a large scale. When you talk about like 90% of the fund goes to very big cats and other charismatic species, and only just like 5%, less than 5% comes to these kind of smaller taxa. And in that, lower taxas would get much lesser. So all these factors leads to what we study, and that's how they became little. Now though, like the system has been changed, and like people are getting interested to study them, so we are coming to know about them more. Maybe in the future people might be interested to study more.
Yes. There is a question in the chat. I'll read it out. What is the question is to both the speakers. So what is the major difference between cat and fishing cat, likewise dolphin and humpback dolphins? Wonderful presentation. Thank you. It's by ma'am. Could you hear me?
Yes, can you just, I
It's a
mean,
very naive question, huh? Like a primary school, but I really wish to know the difference. Both of you.
okay, what is the difference between a cat and the fishing cat? Okay, so typically, so most every it's like a wild cat. Fishing cat is generally a wild cat, and it's dependent mostly on the wetlands. And not only on mangroves, but there are present in other habitats like riparian vegetation, riverine habitats, and even in Sri Lanka and some parts we can find them in the forest tracts where there is availability of food resources. So that's how we associate the cat, but the primary food for them is the fish. That's how their evolution has come up. That's how the name has been coined out, fishing cat. When the first people who saw that, they saw them mostly associated with the wetland. That's what they thought, it's like fishing cat. But when the studies are coming up more, there are in many habitats, but primarily they're associated with the wetlands or any rivers or lakes. Yeah.
Likewise, there are like several species of dolphins. Overall, like we can say there are about 120 species of marine mammals worldwide, and we find about 30 species in Indian waters. And Tamil Nadu has the highest diversity of marine mammals recorded, which is about 26 species. So we broadly categorize dolphins under cetaceans, which includes dolphins, whales, and porpoises. There are many species of dolphins in Indian waters, like the spinner dolphins, common dolphins, bottlenose dolphins. So actually, in the case of marine mammals, they are distributed spatially. Like as I mentioned about humpback dolphins, they prefer to stay closer in the waters. After like 20 meters depth to about 100 meters depth or 50 meters depth, we'll find bottlenose dolphins. And dolphins like spinner dolphins are deep oceanic species. They prefer waters between 200 to 400 meters. So it goes on like that, like, sperm whales dive up to 3000 meters and so on. So they are like distributed spatially. Because these animals have like a hump on their back, they are called as the humpback dolphins.
Thank you.
So I have a question. Yeah, Akhil, please.
No, ma'am, you can go ahead. I was reading the
I'll
question.
just ask one question. So I have a question for Dr. Rahul. So I would like to know that have you observed any impact of climate change, like they talk about sea level rise or change in salinity or change in temperature. So do you see any visible impact on dolphin? And also, like apart from this unsustainable fishing, are there any other impact of like other adverse impact of anthropogenic activity, like plastic pollution or any other kind of pollution? Like you have uh, uh, this oil uh, plant, what you call is sorry, I missed that term. So you have all these refineries and all that, like because you have this coastal regulatory zone where like they have given coastal area for industrial purpose. So do you see any kind of visible impact on dolphins of climate change and also pollution?
So one of the challenges in marine ecosystem is decoupling local environmental impacts with the larger impacts of climate change. I mean, we are referring to what like the fishermen have been observing for the last 30, 40 years, and availability of fish, local extinction of certain species of fish. Like if you talk to any traditional fishermen here, they'll say they list out at least 10 to 15 names of fish that they are not finding anymore. So people have been observing long-term changes in weather conditions, and mainly small-scale fishers rely on seasonal factors, including day-to-day weather conditions that guide their fishing operations. And like there's a lot of unpredictability that has come into the picture, with respect to availability of species during particular seasons, intensity of cyclones and storms increasing, wind speeds increasing during certain seasons, and so on, which poses many challenges to their fishing operation. Not only are the fishing communities affected due to the decline of fish, but also the dolphins. And humpback dolphins are very susceptible to coastal development activities. Like in countries like Taiwan and so on, a lot of port development and coastal development activities have come up. Of course, like it's also coming up in India, but there are like studies that show examples of what coastal development can do to humpback dolphins' behavior, how they particularly avoid certain areas during some times when construction activities go on. And generally, the status of the estuaries, except for a few estuaries that are still intact, most of the estuaries are basically like, dumping grounds of waste and, places where power plants and ports are, set up. And earlier, humpback dolphins used to enter many estuaries. Now that has declined. First of all, because they don't follow fish. Fish doesn't enter into the estuary, and because of siltation and other factors, the depth of the estuaries have also declined. So, and I actually believe that that's also the reason why humpback dolphins are engaging in this kind of behavior, where they're like, depredating from fishing nets, because they're unable to find like enough fish in the wild. Or if you ask the fishers, they'll say they are like lazy animals, that because they're intelligent, they're not like, eating fish like sharks, chasing behind fish, but like they are like sort of observing the movements of fishers and so on, and depredating the nets. But this has like long-term negative impacts, because dolphins can culturally transmit behaviors to their young ones. So when they're feeding from nets, the young ones are also learning, and it's like in the short term, it might be positive for them, but on a long-term basis, they are also consuming fishing net material actually. So only when we start looking, what they're eating, like necropsy studies and so on, that clearly identifies what their stomach contents are, and so on. Like we'll produce more evidence to show how their diets are also changing, causing them to behave in certain ways which were not observed in the past.
Thank you, Rahul.
So there is a question in the chat for Rahul sir. The Gangetic dolphins are present in the freshwater rivers. Are they also similar species?
Yeah, so there are several freshwater dolphins. including the Gangetic dolphins here and Amazon pink dolphins. But they are exclusively freshwater dolphins, and Gangetic dolphins are also blind. So in terms of evolution, they are like much more predated compared to humpback dolphins. So basically, Gangetic dolphins are under much more of a bigger threat compared to humpback dolphins when it comes to fishing, because these animals can't see and they use particular cues to sort of navigate through these waters. But the oceanic dolphins are much more evolved. They have better eyes and better communication that they operate with. And Gangetic dolphins entirely rely on acoustic communication. So that is very sharp in them. So they can actually find out the thickness between a 5 rupee coin and a 1 rupee coin if you drop them in water.
My question to you, Rahul sir, is, as you pointed out, it's the species is elusive, and you pointed out, but there are various ways in which you can research on this low-cost methods. So I wanted to ask, how difficult or easy is it to study the species, like not even monetarily, but even is it feasible to do the entire study or things like that?
Yeah, so there are many ways. Actually, like my work is an example of what sort of perseverance can achieve in terms of understanding the species. Basically, in the global north, because of the resource availability and so on, there's like a lot of focus on marine mammals, so they can afford separate research boards to actually operate and study the species. But as Giridhar also mentioned earlier, there are funding constraints whenever it comes to like any environment related work in our country. But despite these challenges, there are so many ways, because from interviews with the fishing communities, we understand where the animals are. So that's how like I also sort of got into doing my PhD work. So I traveled the coast of southeast coast of India over like a 2 or 3 month period, meeting people and talking to them about humpback dolphins, showing them pictures and so on. And that's when I realized that like certain conflicts occur in the Gulf of Mannar and Park Bay. So in these areas, we can actually focus efforts to study their populations, or like density of these animals, or like even like their interactions with fisheries and so on. Likewise, in places like Krishna and Godavari, when I met people, they mentioned that dolphins are commonly sighted in this region. Just to give an example, like Giridhar and I were on a trip to Antarvedi estuary. There was a person standing there. He actually takes photos of tourists who come there. So we went and asked him about the humpback dolphins. He said, yeah, they'll come, come in sometime. They come at around 1 o'clock. And it was very hot and we didn't know what to do. And this temple was offering free food. So we went and had like good food and returned back at 1 p.m. And the dolphins came exactly like during the time that he mentioned, when the tide actually changed. So people have been observing these animals for a long time, and it just takes some time and effort on the researchers' part to identify these areas and start conducting long-term work, because conservation efforts require long-term efforts in making changes. So even if we focus on certain parts, like people in Andhra or people in Tamil Nadu look at like particular sites over a longer time period, we can compare across what we are observing in terms of the data that we are collecting, and then it becomes easier to collate and understand the conservation and threats to the dolphins.
Thank you, sir. I guess
I have a question. I think it's for both of you. So how effective these marine protected areas or marine national parks are in terms of protecting these mammal species? So do you have any special marine protected area or national parks dedicated to these species? I'm sure I think there won't be much work related to conserving fishing cat, but maybe something on marine this dolphin.
You wanna go first, Giridhar?
Yeah, yes. So regarding fishing cat, yes, what you told is like right. So they're not designated marine protected areas. They was established long back for mangrove protections. So the place where I work is like Koringa and Krishna Valley Science Park, basically for protecting the coastal habitats as such, but not for fishing cats. Fishing cats came up in the later stage that there are like good population of them out there, but still like considering the flagship speciesness and their role in the wetlands. So now like forest department is slowly uh, making their way to just make as fishing cat as one iconic species. So that way I think in like coming years we can expect that because of that fishing cat status, which is like scheduled species in India, which can also help the other like non-protected mangrove forests in that area. So these kind of protected areas will also help the non-protected areas below. Between the Krishna and the Godavari. So that way, I think it's better to protect the cat. That's what the forest department is taking initiatives on.
So in terms of marine mammals, protected areas don't usually work because these animals have a large home range. And for instance, for an example, like if humpback dolphins have about 250 kilometers of home range, and if we are sort of covering the entire habitat that they're using, then it causes problems because there is also intense dependence of marine resources by the small scale fishing communities. So any sort of top-down approach to conservation, like protected areas, will elicit response from the community, and it actually like might work in a very counterproductive way. And generally in India, marine protected areas are very ecosystem specific. If you look at the Gulf of Marine National Park, it was around the islands where coral reefs are. If you look at the Gulf of Kutch Marine National Park, again, the same ecosystem focused conservation. But despite protecting these areas mainly for corals, what can marine protected areas do in the context of climate change? Because we know that corals can bleach when temperatures increase, and though marine protected area as a spatial tool can bring some benefits if they are designed well, it cannot protect corals against the impacts of climate change. So then there are many more challenges involved in creation and designation of marine protected areas.
Just to add to what sir was saying, and a question also, the CRZ rules, the 2019 coastal regulation amendments that has happened have made it easier for industries and this to accumulate land near the coastal regions, and it's easier for them. The regulations have been relaxed for a bit. So obviously there will be adverse impact on the environment and the surroundings, but can we actually quantify the impact, or is it too early to say anything about that?
We are actually already seeing the impacts of heavy industrialization in many parts of the Indian coastline. If you look at the case of Ennur in Chennai, we can see what heavy industrialization can do to mainly places Giridhar is working on estuaries and mangrove ecosystems where a lot of people are dependent on these resources, and generally estuaries are birthplaces of fish, right? They are important nursing grounds. So from where actually fish spawn and multiply on the coast. So we are basically targeting the birthplaces of fish and marine, so-called marine resources, which has a clear impact. We've already been seeing, and it's going to intensify further. But the conundrum here is that now that we know that sea levels are going to rise, we know that salinization of aquifers is happening along our coast, and beaches and these coastlines are important buffers that sort of prevents these kind of natural hazards from happening. We know that storm surges are getting intense, cyclones are getting intense. So basically the impact the coast receives is intensifying as we go forward. But we are also making ourselves vulnerable in sort of damaging and sort of making these ecosystems are also vulnerable to sort of buffer the impacts of climate change, or just like, protecting these ecosystems so that their function is not impaired?
Ma'am, can we take one question?
Yes, please.
So the question is to Giridhar sir.
So
What?
I think we can invite audience so they can, if they can also switch on the camera and then they can ask their questions
Yeah.
themselves.
This is yeah, it's actually on the chat, but yeah.
Yeah, so maybe we can invite Srilata. Srilata, you can please ask your question.
Yeah, good afternoon. This is such a wonderful session. It's a wonderful effort. Wednesdays for the water. It's really beautiful. I'm really happy to be a part of this whole thing. My question here was that it's so nice to say that we are a part of this ecosystem and not apart from it. And that's what we as environmentalists have always been trying to tell, I think, our future generations. And Girdhar sir, because you're doing this wonderful thing of involving children. I am basically an environment educator. I also do a lot of programs with school children, college. I feel when it comes to environment, everybody, all our children, we may be educated, but not probably sensitized to the environment. So I really wanted to understand from you, what are your observations when it comes to involving children? What are their, how do they perceive conservation vis-a-vis development? This is always, I think, the biggest question. You said Godavari has maximum number of dams and everything is shunned off against the thing that we need development, right? And we are going to be the biggest, one of the biggest GDP countries very soon and all that stuff. So how do children perceive this whole thing?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah. Thank you very much for this. So, yeah, the whole idea of why I started this children program is that because like in most parts of this Krishna and Godavari, we can see that children go actually for fishing with their parents. Not like, not everyone, but there are few sections of people who go into like on their parents' boat and they just stay in the mangroves. Actually, they do everything on the boat and they stay completely on the boat itself. So that is where my intervention started. Like, how do we, educate these kind of children to bring about like what kind of, because as Rahul told, where we work on the estuaries are the places where like, a lot of food resources and every fish come there. But the fact is that to say that much of the fish has declined. So if you compare with many years, the fish has completely declined. So if the children still, stay there without coming out of their, the natural thing. So in the coming futures, they don't have any food resources left. So that is where we thought of like educating them. And also in Andhra, children are very, they're very, the parents are very sensitized toward the children. And when we showed the pictures and when we distributed the banners of the fishing cat, so we saw that the children went on pasted on their walls of their house all the fishing cat images. That's how we brought that sensitization even to the elders. When, because we couldn't enter directly to the elders and ask them, you can do this and that. But when we went with the children, the impact was little higher in the terms of that. So that's how we started the whole program. And then when my books, like my comic books, like understanding, I made them in a very simplest way for them to understand. Like, this is the fishing cat, they know fishing cat, they just stay with them, they see them on a regular basis. Because I couldn't see the fishing cat before, but they are still staying there and they can see fishing cats on day-to-day basis. But the only thing is that I just brought that sensitization. I use the children to educate the elders and make a bridge between the like most of my conservation activities. But coming to development, yeah, it's keep on happening. And the issue is what Rahul told, like it's a day-to-day process and the development happens. But most of the people here in this landscape are like, they don't look at the development as such. For them, it's like they need that daily wage or like the daily surplus of the food resource, and they go back to home. They just stay happily with their family. That's it. They don't look into the development in what we look at that. So even still, I feel like that I'm just pulling these children into this education system, and because they're happy now. So the other way also, it's yeah, that's how we started all this program, the Children for Fishing. Hope I answered that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
still, it's a
Thank you so much.
critic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's lucky actually they directly connect and relate.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, we live in urban situations where for the children the water comes from the tap.
That's true. Yeah,
They wouldn't be able to name the 5 lakes from where
that's
they
true.
get their water.
Yeah, but these kids are very smart. They know everything. They know every taxa which is there in the mangrove, and they can tell you everything. Like these kids are the first people who told me that fishing cat also have some acoustic communicate. I mean, they have some communications with them. So that's how even I did one of my chapter on fishing cat, because that's how I got also influenced by them. So they're very smart kids compared to
Great.
what we see in our cities.
So they
Yeah.
are unlike urban
Yeah, yeah,
children
yeah.
or youth, they are
Yeah.
still connected to
That's
nature.
what.
So, yeah, please. So, Giridhar, do you also conduct fishing cat census like tiger census or bird census?
Yeah, we it's like because it's like going to the mangroves is not, it's like it's a very time consuming and also funding, it's all. So we do this periodic estimate. It's not like tigers, but we do certain periods of time. And also seasonality is more important in mangrove system. We do mostly in the summer and the other time. But it all depends on the funding, because we have to invest a lot of money, because we have to take boats and for all that we require. But it can't be done like terrestrial ecosystem where we can just walk and go and keep the camera traps. We have to look at several factors before starting the population. And soon we'll be starting another population estimation in another downstream of Godavari. So that will be starting. That also we got permission from forest.
Thank you.
Yeah. But it's very difficult to do like the terrestrial ecosystems.
Yeah. So,
So
I think, yeah, okay.
yeah, just a last, sorry, just last, when you talked about forest department, what has been the forest department's reaction to what you're doing? How supportive are they with what you're doing? Or they become supportive now after it has gained some pace in the community?
Yeah. Forest department is all, I mean, they support to all the time. And even after, like before we started anything, they know, I mean, they were doing some interventions before. And so, but because where conservationists come into places, like we will be the bridge between the communities and the forest department. So certain places where like communities might not be very free to, openly discuss with the forest department their problems and all, there, that's how where conservationists and researchers come into place. So if that kind of bridge, if the bridge is like it's there, and definitely forest department is all the time, they will be doing good interventions. They're always they're everywhere supportive us. Yeah.
Yeah, Mansi, do you have any question or anything to say?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I have questions for both of you actually, and my questions are very primary school kind of questions, but please bear with it. So my question to Rahul is, when you were talking about these dolphins, swimming along the nets and they are eating up the body of the small fishes. Recently I'm starting my project on plastic pollution in marine ecosystem. I just wonder how these nets, microplastics really work in the tummies of all the fishes, especially dolphins, because they must be eating up some part of the nets when they are eating the fish as well. I mean, do they have any, I mean, of course, all the fish have these gills to, filter all kinds of crap out of their body, but we always see nowadays that when fishes are dissected, we find a lot of garbage in their body inside their tummy. So do you really see dolphins are also threatened by all kinds of pollution like this? And my question to Girdhar is more on the forest department, because I hear you speak about forest department 3 times now, and I'm quite wondering what is forest department doing in mangroves, and where is water department, and where is fisheries department, should be equally responsible. So how do these three departments really share responsibilities in mangroves? So these are my two different questions. Being a governance scholar, I'm just curious, why forest in mangroves? I mean, I just enlighten me on that, but what are these other two departments doing? So I will pause here and listen to their questions as answers. Sorry.
So yeah, definitely, like marine life forms are affected mainly due to plastics and microplastics, because microplastics resemble plankton. So it's consumed by many fish, which gets lodged in their stomach and it doesn't come out. But the dolphins, of course, they are consuming net material. So, we also need to see the changes in the fishing technology that has taken place. Before the 50s, we didn't have like any material like this. But in the 50s, like cotton nets were introduced. Then we got nylon, and in the 90s, monofilament nets were introduced. These are basically plastic nets. They actually cause a lot of problem to the fish themselves and how fish are caught in these nets. They die instantly and so on. So dolphins consuming net material along with the fish like is a huge problem. So whenever dolphins are washed ashore, I think we need to have like systematic studies to do carry out necropsies and find their stomach contents, like what is the composition of fish versus what is the composition of plastic material and so on. Because I've heard like many of the fishermen telling me that these animals also die because they plastic nets and other material gets lodged in their stomach and they don't have any more space to like consume fish.
Yes, that's what I read once. Yeah.
So they feel like they are remaining full, but they're unable to feed, and like over time they become weak and they die. So plastic is like a major issue, and I'm not sure how we're going to like actually solve this issue.
So Monami, you have some questions. So I have a researcher here who's working on plastic, so maybe she will ask you later. So thank you.
Yeah, regarding the forest department, like fisheries. So yeah, as you told, like much of our like interventions we do with the forest department. That I agree with that, because being it's a scheduled species and it's protected in Wildlife Act, we most of our interventions and most of our activities we inform to the forest department, and forest department is very crucial. The restoration of the mangroves, and they do a lot of works, like even if there is a degraded patches of the mangrove, they take inventions, they invent, like they bring in a lot of schemes and they just do the restoration of the mangroves. And also they give better protection that not much communities, or they do over exploitation of the resource. That way they do that's how we intervene. But regarding fisheries and the water thing, yeah, we still don't bring in more people of that, but we're still thinking of involving them to in our upcoming conservation initiatives, and but most of their interventions only goes with the development. Like in India, I think most of the studies on waters and are still not much as per what we have to do. So I think we still have to put them and bring them into our most of our initiatives. Yeah.
So I'm just curious, sorry, but because it is water, because there is fish, I'm sure they have some say in it, right? What my attention from you is that forest department is giving permission and not the fishing department, not the water department. So anyway, we talk about it later in detail. It's a governance.
Actually, yeah. So these mangrove forest comes under forest
because it's
department.
It's a marine protected area.
Yeah. So now this Mishti scheme, which was launched during this budget session, so I think that is trying to address like this kind of integration where they are involving local communities and then different departments. I think.
Yes. Yeah. It's recently. That the scheme is coming out.
So
thank you.
But as I said, like most of the dams actually they have regulations, and much of the studies have been not done, like how much silt or like deposits come down the stream. They don't focus much on the downstream, but most of them goes with like looking at the upstream rivers and what mitigation measures we have to do. But much of the studies in India doesn't focus on the downstream, like the estuaries and all, how much impact it would have. So that's why we need to have a long-term studies in this estuaries. It's like not like 5 years or 10 years study would be feasible for that. We need to have a long-term studies because the coastal geomorphology completely changes when a dam sets up in the upstream. So every department should be, they have to, their role is very much in this kind of places. So I think everyone should come up. I hope this Misty kind of thing brings in all people and something would, a positive thing might happen.
Yeah, because generally in India, water department or water resources department, they focus on irrigation or power generation, and then they don't talk about biodiversity or conservation. Similarly, like with the fisheries department, they focus more on fisheries, fish protection, and livelihoods, food security. So,
yes.
So this biodiversity and conservation is not part of their agenda at present.
That's it. That's really
Yeah.
pity, huh?
Yeah. So I think through this kind of initiatives, we are trying to bring in that kind of paradigm shift that now the focus will also be on biodiversity and conservation aspects of water.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think we are done with this session, and I've thoroughly enjoyed the session. It was like quite enriching and interesting. So I would like to thank all of you and all the participants, especially audience, for their active participation, and I hope they also enjoyed this episode. And I would like to mention that all our episodes are available on W4W Foundation's YouTube channel. So if you want to see other like previous episodes, so they are now available online.
Yeah.
So we'll meet with some new species and new ecosystems. So I request you to stay tuned.
Thank you. Thank you, Jayati. Thank you, all of you, all the participants to be present here. And most importantly, Rahul Muralidharan and Giridhar Malla to really give us such wonderful presentation. I really wanted the presentation to be longer, honestly. And now I regret yesterday. Why did I request you to?
Yeah, we kept asking them to be very short. So they actually
still we
took it very seriously. And
yes.
So actually, I wanted to show a video, but I thought I would take the entire time, so I couldn't show it.
Oh,
you
I
should have
really
shown.
feel sorry, but I'm sure you can share the video link in the chat box.
Sure.
Even I was really thinking, I wish I had really requested them to present longer, but as you see, even with the shorter presentation, we have gone overboard to an hour session. So you can imagine what happens when we request longer presentations. But this is more to really initiate the conversation about this species. So thank you so much, all of you, especially both the speakers and also dear Akhil for raising this question and also converting into this conversation into a very good discussion. So before I wind up the session, let me announce you for the next week, Wednesdays for Water, which is on 17th of May, when we have the Riverscape series going on. And this is also on climate change, culture, and riverscapes. So we have lake and pond series, we have biodiversity series, and we have riverscape series going on these days for water. All these series are going to run till August as of now. So please stay tuned for that. Then we also have Friday Waters, as you know. So this coming Friday, we have currently going on thesis book reading. And then next Friday, we have thesis club. So in this book reading, we are going to talk about water conflicts, which is a day after on 12th of May. But on May 19th, we are going to invite a PhD scholar to talk about disentangling the drivers of domestic water scarcity in Eastern Himalayan region for basically talking from Rinan Shah, who is also, I think, from A3. So we look forward to having you for Wednesday sessions and Friday sessions. But you are also aware that we also do Monday sessions specifically dedicated to women in water. So do keep joining us and stay tuned with w4w.in, which is our website. And we really wish that the water conversation goes on to really work towards water conservation. That's our motto in Wednesdays for Water, Friday Waters, and Monday Munching with Women for Water. Thank you so much, all of you. And at the last, thank you, Jayati, for conducting all these sessions so wonderfully. You keep bringing all these non-human studying people. Huh? I really like it. Thank you so much.